for the Philippine National Anthem. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Arangkada Philippines Forum 2023 towards sustainable transformations. Please make yourselves comfortable as we begin our program. Our corporate partners are Platinum sponsors Capital One, First Philippine Holdings. Our gold sponsors Eastern Communications and SGV. Our silver sponsors, Marubeni, Royal Cargo, Quezon Power, and GHD. Our bronze sponsors, AIG, Alaska Milk Corporation, Amazon Web Services, BDO, Cargill, Converge Business, and Eon. Our event partners, Asia Society Philippines, the British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, the Foundation for Economic Freedom, Fujitsu, PhilExport, IT Business Process Association Philippines, Makati Business, and Philippine Exporters Confederation. Our media partners, Business Mirror, Business World, CNN Philippines, and the Philippine Daily Inquirer. And our official venue partner, Marriott International. To officially begin our program, let us give a warm welcome to Paulo Duarte. Paulo is the Managing Director of Bosch Philippines and the President of the European Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Freud Tahale, for that beautiful rendition of the Philippine National Anthem. Your Excellencies, NEDA Secretary R.C. Balisacan, DTI USEC Perry Rodolfo, members of the Diplomatic Corps, heads of our partner Philippine business groups and industry associations, our corporate sponsors, partners in the government and private sector, friends from the media, and all our attendees present here today. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. As we say in Portugal, bom dia. Welcome, and for some of you, welcome back to the annual Arangkada Philippines Forum. Today is our 12th anniversary forum with a theme Arangkada, Philippines, towards sustainable transformations. I am Paulo Duarte, Managing Director of Bosch Philippines and President of the European Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. Welcome you on behalf of the 7 members of the Joint Foreign Chambers of the Philippines, the American, Australian, New Zealand, Canadian, European, Japanese, Korean chambers, and the Philippine Association of Multinational Regional Headquarters, Inc., or as we say, PAMURI. The GFC is a coalition of these 7 foreign chambers representing the countries and firms that are among the largest trading partners and investors of the Philippines. We believe in the enormous potential of the Philippines as a foreign direct investment destination and in capacity of the Philippine government with support from the private sector to pursue and implement the necessary reforms and policies to improve the investment climate and competitiveness of the country. This, of course, includes advocating sustainability in doing business and responsible management and utilization of natural resources amid the long-term social, economic, and environmental impacts of climate change in the Philippines. For this year's forum, we have brought together public and private sector experts and industry leaders to provide insights on the perspectives on sustainable and inclusive growth during the 3 highly informative and fully loaded panel discussions. We are incredibly honored to have with us NEDA Secretary R.C. Balisacan to give the keynote address this morning, as well later DTI Secretary Alfredo Pascual and DNR Secretary Tony Yulo Loyozaga for the afternoon keynote. We also have a recorded keynote message from Climate Change Commission Executive Director Robert Borja, as well as a message from Senator Pia Cayetano, who chairs the Senate Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovations, and Future Thinking to look forward to throughout the day. Since we launched the Arangkada Philippines advocacy in 2010, the GFC has remained committed to advocate for accelerated inclusive economic growth, job creation, investments, export of goods and services, building of infrastructure, remediation of environments, and reduction of poverty for the Philippines. And for us to see this through for future generations, it is imperative for us to work towards sustainable transformations. We hope that you find joining us today a worthwhile experience. Maraming salamat po, obrigado, thank you very much, and enjoy the forum.
Obrigado, Paulo, for that message. To offer an overview of today's program, we call on Eb Hinchliffe. Eb is the Executive Director of the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines.
Good morning, everybody. Really great to see you here. As mentioned, I am Eb Hinchliffe, Executive Director for the American Chamber. And I'll go through a brief overview of the program for you this morning. Thank you, Paulo, for that opening remarks. Appreciate doing that for us and getting the forum underway. The 12th forum is unbelievable. Wow. Before I do that, though, bear with me for a second. I want to recognize the TAP team, the Arangkada project team, that put all this together for us. They were here till late last night, been working on it endlessly since we started this. So if I could just take a second and then recognize Randall, Nika, Sarah, Tin, Nadine, and all the others that put this together. Big round of applause for my Arangkada TAP team. Way to go, team. Another great, successful year. The Joint Foreign Chambers, as mentioned by Paulo, we've been started, the Arangkada project started in 2010, and this is our 12th forum in that time. Working with the Joint Foreign Chambers has always been a great success. We've always advocated for to improve and enhance the Philippine business environment. We want to attract more high-paying, better investment in this country. We create better quality jobs and ultimately achieve faster and more inclusive growth for all. And this has been our target from day one. The title is very important, Sustainable Transformation. I just returned from, I returned this summer from a trip to the United States. Record heat all over, unbelievable. I just got back from Italy, and the month of October was the warmest October on record. That will tell you why that the effects of climate change is increasingly clear that we have to do something. We have to make it sustainable development to be a primary and an inseparable consideration of everything we do in business in the pursuit of investment and economic growth. And that's what we're about today. And that being said, if you recall the President Marcos during his SONA, he also mentioned that last July. He emphasized during that speech the need to ensure a climate resilient and a sustainable future for all. So today, again, we highlight how the private and the public sector can work together and we can collaborate and achieve climate resilience and ensure the responsible use and management of the country's natural resources. So in order to do that, we put together 3 unbelievable panels today. It's really a fully packed deal. In addition to the 3 panels, we also have the privilege of the Secretary's speech speaking to us today, the keynote, one of which, of course, is with us already, Secretary R.C. Balisacan. Secretary, thank you so much for being here. We also, he'll be speaking shortly after mine. Later this afternoon, as mentioned, we have DNR Secretary Tony Yulo Lozaga, and then officially we have Secretary DTI Fred Pascual. Originally, Fred was going to speak recorded message, but a trip to Israel was canceled. Now, Secretary Pascual will be joining us live and deliver the speech this afternoon. We're very happy for that. And then later on at the evening, as mentioned, we'll have Climate Change Secretary, Climate Mission Secretary, Robert Borja, to be our speaker. For panel 1, just to briefly describe it, it's discussing trade, investment, and sustainable growth. Then that will be followed by a message by Senator Pia Cayetano, a recorded message by her, talking about the Philippines' commitment to the 2023 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So we'll look forward to hearing from her. Then you don't get a break. Well, you may get a break, but you don't get a break from the action. We're going to have a working panel during the lunchtime. This will be a working lunch panel. It's driving change, building momentum, conversations on sustainability in doing business. And some of the key leaders of our business organizations will be presenting on that panel. Then our third and final panel discussion will be focused on the sectoral priorities in advancing water, energy, food security, and the nexus in policy development. Now, that's a lot. But all this information, if you look at your badge, you'll see there's a QR code on it. If you click on that QR code, it'll give you the program, the speakers, everything that you need to keep us from printing out so much paper and killing so many trees. Then at the end of the program today, we are honoring, every year we recognize one Lifetime Achievement Award. This year that award is going to the founder and establishment of Pamuri, Mr. Shamin Qureshi. Again, I encourage you to check. What Mr. Qureshi did for the business in the Philippines is unbelievable. We owe him a lot. And then again, as I mentioned, to end the program, we'll have the recorded message from Climate Commissioner Secretary Borge. And with that, I will just say thank you, enjoy the program. I got here a little bit early, and I've been walking around the room, visiting with a bunch of people. I really have seen a lot of old friends here today, been here with us for quite a while, but also got to meet a lot of new people. And I hope to, if I haven't met you yet, please catch up with me sometime today. I'd love to meet you. But for those of you who are new in the program, I would say that you may not know so much about Arangkada and the history of it. So for that, I can't think of anything better than let this gentleman here tell you the history of Arangkada. Thank you very much, everybody.
It's now my privilege to introduce Arangkada.
And this is the first annual assessment.
Now, we are observing the second anniversary today of the Arangkada project. Mabuhay, Magandang Umaga, and welcome to the third Arangkada Annual Forum.
And a happy Arangkada 4th Anniversary Forum. Mabuhay to everyone.
Our purpose is to observe our 5th anniversary. Since we launched the Arangkada document in December of 2010, welcome to the 6th Annual Arangkada Forum. Welcome to the 7th Anniversary Arangkada Forum. Good morning, everybody. Magandang Umaga, and welcome to the 8th of these Arangkada Fora that I've been standing before you. Welcome to the 9th Annual Arangkada Philippines Forum. It's a great pleasure to speak at the beginning of this 10th Arangkada Annual Forum on Pathways to a Better Future.
11th Arangkada Philippines Forum, Reform, Rebuild, Recover.
Arangkada, for those who don't know, is a Tagalog word that means to accelerate.
We launched a massive book on December 10, 2010.
This is what it looks like.
It's a 1.5 kilogram monster, 470 pages with 471 recommendations in it. And I thank you very much, and let's Arangkada.
Thank you, John. Thank you. And thank you, Eb, for providing that program overview. To introduce our first keynote speaker, please welcome Joseph Chairman of the Samdo Group Philippines and President of the Korean Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joseph I'm the president of Korean Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines. Our chamber counts among its members Korean multinationals like KEPCO, Korean Air, Samsung, smaller companies in retail and manufacturing, and even your favorite samgyeopsal restaurants. I am also the chairman of Samdo Group of Companies. It is a distinct pleasure for me to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning, a longtime partner in Arangkada advocacy, NEDA Secretary Arsenio R.C. Balisacan. Secretary R.C. is no stranger to Arangkada. In fact, he was a keynote speaker for our third Arangkada Anniversary Forum in 2014. National Economic Development Authority, or NEDA, Secretary Balisacan is an economist with extensive development policy, governance, and administration expertise. acquired from over 35 years of professional work as a government official, non-governmental organization executive, economic advisor, researcher, professor, and consultant for numerous development agencies and intergovernmental organizations. Secretary RC had already previously held the position of NEDA Secretary from 2012 to 2016. He also served as an inaugural chairperson and chief executive of the Philippine Competition Commission from 2016 to 2022. Dr. Balisakan has served in various capacities in many academic and professional organizations and advised and consulted with a number of both development agencies and multilateral institutions. He has authored and co-edited 7 books and published close to 100 academic papers and book chapters covering wide areas on development and political economy of policy reforms in the Philippines and East Asia. For his research and other scholarly work in economics, he was elected a lifetime member of National Academy of Science and Technology in 2008. He holds a PhD in economics from the University of Hawaii, on MS in agricultural economics from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and BS in agriculture from the Mariano Marcos State University. As a joint foreign chambers, we have met with and collaborated with the Secretary RC on several occasions. As NEDA Secretary and PCC Chairperson on issues of mutual concern in advocating for reforming and advancing in Philippine business climate. That being said, I'm sure we are all looking forward to hearing from what Secretary RC has prepared for us this morning. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Secretary Arsenio Balisacan on the stage to give his note address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph Wong, for the very kind introduction. Mr. Paulo Duarte, Ev Henscliffe, and again, Joseph Wong, distinguished officials and representatives from the joint foreign chambers of the Philippines, members of the diplomatic community, colleagues in government, friends in civil society, the private sector, and the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me begin by stating that it is an honor to be invited by the Joint Foreign Chambers of the Philippines to deliver this keynote address at the 12th Anniversary Forum of Arangkada, Philippines. Allow me to discuss the strategies and targets of the Marcos administration aimed at fostering sustained, inclusive growth and attaining its development objectives. Let me focus on investment and partnership opportunities and the economic policy and legislative reforms we are pursuing. Plus on the screen is an outline of my presentation, which covers both short and medium-term considerations. I will discuss strategies outlined in the Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028 and the ongoing efforts to reform the country's investment ecosystem and address the business community's concerns. The Philippine economy, as you may have heard already, has been one of the fastest growing economies in Asia in recent years, with only a brief interruption in 2020 due to the pandemic and our policy responses to it. In the past decade, the economy has sustained a high gross domestic product or GDP growth rate, mostly above 6%. An acceleration compared to the country's historical norm. Notwithstanding domestic and external headwinds, our economy grew by 5.3% in the first half of 2023, it's still one of the fastest growth rates in our region. However, there are several domestic and external risks to sustaining inclusive growth. First, inflation reduces households' purchasing power and puts upward pressure on wages and interest rates, potentially dampening investment and growth prospects. Second is public underspending, which leads to gaps or delays in implementing programs and projects. Geopolitical conflicts in many regions are a third factor that may result in supply bottlenecks and financial shocks. Still, while we have not escaped the broad-based downgrade in growth outlooks for Asia and the world, the prospects for the Philippine economy remain among the brightest in the region for 2023 and 2024, as projected by various multilateral institutions such as the IMF, World Bank, ADB, and AMRO. However, to ensure a robust recovery and sustain its high growth trajectory in the medium term, the Philippine economy must significantly increase investment to match or surpass its dynamic neighbor's economic momentum. While the past decade has seen a steady build-up of investment, we have yet to regain the trajectory pre-pandemic. Foreign direct investment has risen relative to its historical averages. Still, we must do more to foster favorable business climate underpinned by an enabling policy and regulatory environment. From a longer-term perspective, development perspective, the Philippine economy is poised to benefit from the country's demographic transition, which refers to the increasing proportion of its working age population to the total population. With a young, vibrant, educated workforce, we can anticipate increased productivity and a consistent demand for consumer goods and investments. This so-called demographic sweet spot will contribute to the economy's growth prospects for the next 2 to 3 decades. But for this demographic transition to prove a boon to the economy, we must address the pandemic's profound scarring effects on learning and skills formation, improve labor market conditions, and wrap up employment-creating investments. The Marcos administration formulated the Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028 as its development blueprint for the next 6 years. This document outlines the strategies, policies, and legislative priorities to address pressing short-term issues and the constraints to rapid, sustained, and inclusive growth. The PDP sets ambitious targets. It aims for nothing less than economic transformation, intending to create a prosperous, inclusive, and resilient society consistent with Ambition Natin 2040, the country's long-term development vision. For example, recall that we aim for 6.5% to 8% annual GDP growth in the medium term and a single-digit poverty incidence by 2028. Despite the external headwinds and domestic challenges, these targets are still achievable. The PDP's priorities are aligned with achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. These include advancing R&D for the next 6 years. This document outlines the strategies, policies, and legislative priorities to address pressing short-term issues and the constraints to rapid, sustained, and inclusive growth. The PDP sets ambitious targets. It aims for nothing less than economic transformation, intending to create a prosperous, inclusive, and resilient society consistent with Ambition Natin 2040, the country's long-term development vision. For example, recall that we aim for 6.5% to 8% annual GDP growth in the medium term and a single-digit poverty incidence by 2028. Despite the external headwinds and domestic challenges, these targets are still achievable. The PDP's priorities are aligned with achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. These include technology and innovation, accelerating climate action, and strengthening disaster resilience, as well as promoting trade and investments. The Marcos administration will vigorously implement the strategies outlined in the PDP to create a more conducive regulatory and policy environment and sustain the growth momentum. The following measures, plus on the screen, have been passed in Congress, and the executive branch has implemented other critical reform and policy initiatives. These initiatives aim to make the Philippines an attractive destination for investors, particularly in the infrastructure, technology, and energy sectors. We expect these sectors to drive the country's sustainable development. I am pleased to share that we have revamped the governing frameworks for high-impact public-private partnerships, or PPPs, in the investment ecosystem. The revised 2022 Implementing Rules and Regulations, or IRR, of the Build, Operate, Transfer, or BOT law addresses various concerns from private sector stakeholders regarding financial viability and implementation ambiguity. The upcoming amendment to the BOT law, otherwise known as the PPP Code, reflects the features of the revised IRR and shall be a landmark piece of legislation for this administration. It aims to harmonize all legal, policy, and regulatory frameworks in developing, implementing, and monitoring PPP projects, focusing on balancing public and private sector objectives. Additionally, the Investment Coordination Committee guidelines for PPP projects outlined the approval process for these projects. The last item on the list is the 2023 revised NEDA joint venture guidelines, which aim to ensure the full participation of our partners in the joint construction and operation of infrastructure projects. The Office of the President is finalizing the executive order and expediting the processing of documentary requirements for the infrastructure flagship projects or IFPs. The EO aims to simplify the requirements and clearances needed by implementing agencies for priority infrastructure projects. It also ensures the automatic approval of any pending application or request, provided all conditions and payments have been fully complied with. As you can see, private sector participation in implementing and formulating PPPs will remain critical for both physical and social infrastructure. As of October 6, 100 profitable PPP projects are in the pipeline, with approximately 2.52 trillion pesos or 45 billion US dollars. Most of these are in the transport, road, and property development sectors. Other PPP opportunities in social infrastructure include health, solid waste management, and water and sanitation. The government's extensive Build Better More program includes 197 flagship projects or IFPs, a list of big-ticket projects worth about 8.7 trillion pesos or 155 billion US dollars. These projects span different sectors, including physical and digital connectivity, water resources, agriculture, health, power, and energy. The transformative and game-changing projects included in this list will benefit from expedited approval processes and higher prioritization in government spending. 88 of these projects are still undergoing various stages of preparation in which the private sector may participate. The Marcos administration has been proactively addressing bottlenecks in the timely completion of these IFPs. We aim to substantially implement these projects, if not complete, by 2028. We have demonstrated our commitment to turning crucial IFP and PPP projects into reality through our regular NEDA board meetings, at least once a month. The President, no less, chairs the NEDA board, with the NEDA secretary serving as the vice chair. Under the Marcos administration, the average processing period for the following PP projects, displayed on the screen, was 40 days, half of the prescribed maximum working day processing period. We have already approved 5 PPP projects under this administration, including the Ninoy Aquino International Airport, PPP, the Tarlac Pangasinan-La Union Expressway Extension, and the newly approved dialysis renal center for the Baguio General Hospital and Medical Center. The timely approval of these PPP projects highlights our reform's effectiveness and our institution's commitment to driving the administration's socioeconomic agenda. We are partnering with the private sector to continue realizing these high-impact projects. The next generation of reforms will cover critical areas and sectors, such as telecommunication, energy, mining, procurement, land use, and fiscal incentives. These reforms will build on our hard-won gains and initiatives, enabling the transformation of our economic sectors and ensuring sustained inclusive growth. These upcoming reforms, including amendments to the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, or CREATE Act, aim to facilitate more significant investments, enhance efficiency and productivity, and promote private sector activity. We invite you, business and the financial community members, and our development partners to continue investing in the numerous opportunities that have emerged in our economy. The sectors include energy, water and sanitation, airports, logistics, telecommunications, expressways, railways, hospitals, schools, and housing. Additionally, we encourage you to explore our present and emerging growth drivers, such as in agribusiness, mining, manufacturing, education, health, construction, creatives, and the IT BPM. I invite you to scan the QR codes displayed here to access the complete PDP 2023 to 2028 version and the full list and details of the 197 IFPs. As I conclude, I would like to express my sincere hope that we strive toward a sustainable and inclusive future that's in line with our ambition. The national vision of a matatag, maginhawa at panatag na buhay that all Filipinos will enjoy in the coming years and decades. Thank you once again to all of you, and have a good day.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, National Economic and Development Authority Secretary Arsenio Balisacan, thank you for your informative presentation. Please remain on stage as we invite Joseph to go up, together with all the principals of the Joint Foreign Chambers of the Philippines, to present the plaque of appreciation, followed by a photo opportunity. Once again, thank you, Secretary Balisacan. We greatly appreciate your continued support for the Arangkada Philippines Forum. We now move on to our first panel discussion on trade, investment, and sustainable growth. We look forward to the participation of all our delegates in today's panel discussions. The QR code that will be flashed on screen and distributed on your tables is connected to Mentimeter. All you have to do is scan the code to key in your questions for the open forum. Now, to introduce our moderator and panel discussants, please welcome Benjamin Romualdez. Benjamin is the Country Managing Director of Telstra Philippines and the President of the Australian-New Zealand Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Secretary Arce, for your presentation. The members of the Joint Foreign Chambers truly appreciate your support over the years of Arangkada Philippines and look forward to opportunities to work with NEDA in pursuing the country's medium and long-term development goals. Now, on to the next part of the program. The first panel focuses on trade, investment, and sustainable growth, for which we have invited experts to discuss sustainable trade, green equity, and investment, sustainable finance, and MSME integration and capacity building. It seeks to explore the intersections between trade, investment, and sustainable growth, and cover the roles of trade and investment in accelerating growth, identifying opportunities to boost green investments and sustainable exports, mainstreaming sustainable finance, and integrating MSMEs in the value chain. We've put together an outstanding group of panelists for this discussion. First, Undersecretary Seferino Rodolfo, or USEC Perry. He's the Undersecretary for Industry, Development, and Trade Policy, where he's been leading the crafting and implementation of the Philippine industrial policy and international trade negotiation agenda, as well as the Philippine government's bilateral trade and investment engagements with key partner economies. Among USEC Perry's accomplishments are the successful negotiation of the Philippines-European Free Trade Association Free Trade Agreement, the Philippines' application to the EU GSP Plus program, and the substantial conclusion of the Philippines-South Korea Free Trade Agreement. He's concurrently managing head of the Board of Investments. Yusek Rodolfo obtained his economics degree from the School of Economics of the University of the Philippines and his Master of Science in Industrial Economics from the Center for Research and Communication, which is now University of Asia and the Pacific. He holds a doctorate degree in Public Administration from the National College of Public Administration and Governance of the University of the Philippines. Next, we have Mr. Ralph Van Doorn, Senior Economist from the World Bank's Macroeconomics Trade and Investment Global Practice, East Asia and Pacific Division, and he will speak on green equity and investment. Previously, Mr. Van Doorn was the country economist for Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Mongolia, and supported governments on fiscal growth and debt issues in countries across Africa, East Asia, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe. Prior to joining the World Bank, he worked at the emerging markets fixed income team at Credit Suisse in London, focusing on Egypt, Kazakhstan, and the GCC countries. He holds a Master of Research degree in economics from the London School of Economics and a Master of Science degree in applied physics from Delft University of Technology. The third panelist is the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Deputy Director, Rodora Brazil de Vera, and who's an expert on sustainable finance. Deputy Director Brazil de Vera is from the Sustainable Finance Staff Unit under the Supervisory Policy and Research Department, Financial Supervision Sector of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. The Sustainable Finance staff leads the development and implementation of policy issuances and coordinates with counterpart local and foreign financial sector regulators and supervisors related to sustainable finance. The team is also involved in the development of the BSP Sustainable Central Banking Program and implementation of identified strategies and supporting initiatives. Ms. Brazil de Vera is a member of various working groups such as the Philippine Sustainability Reporting Committee, Financial Sector Forum's Sub-Team on Sustainable Finance Taxonomy, NGFS Workstream on Supervision, and AFI Inclusive Green Finance Working Group. And lastly, but certainly not the least, to speak on MSME integration and capacity building, Mr. Vicente or Vice Catudio Jr., Chief of Party of USAID's Strengthening Private Enterprises for the Digital Economy, or SPEED. Vice Catudio is a digital economy expert with 27 years of professional experience, including 9 years in consulting in the financial services industry. He focuses on e-payments and e-commerce solutions and has helped transition the Philippine economy from cash to digital payments. He advocates for financial inclusion and led initiatives to scale adoption of e-money. Currently, he is the Chief of Party at USAID Speed and was previously the CEO of a fintech startup and a co-founder of a technology startup. To moderate this panel, we welcome Mr. Michael Guarin, partner and head of the Deal Advisory Services of KPMG, RG Manabat & Company, and chairman of the 2023 Finex Foundation. Finex is actually one of our event partners for today's forum. And it seems we have a lot of discussion to look forward to in the next hour. To get the ball rolling, I'd like to invite on stage USEC Perry, Mr. Ralph Van Doorn, Deputy Director Rodora Brazil de Vera, Mr. Vice Catudio, and our moderator, Mr. Michael Guarin, for panel number 1. And once again, I'm Benjamin Romualdez from the Australia-New Zealand Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. May we call on stage our moderator, Michael Guarin, together with our discussants, USEC Perry Rodolfo, Ralph Van Doorn, Deputy Director Rodora Brazil de Vera, and Vice Catudio Jr. And USEC Seferino. Mike, the stage is yours.
Mic test. Hopefully people can hear me clearly enough. So thank you, Jerry. And we're definitely looking forward to this first panel discussion. And but before we start, I'd like to again invite all of the delegates, participants to join the discussion. Hopefully you noticed the hotel panel, no? Putting in the stand-in in the middle of your table. There's a QR code there. Feel free to use the Mentimeter to post your questions. And then we will try to accommodate all, if not most, of the questions after our discussions this morning. So there won't be any individual presentations. So let's start with Yusek Perry. Given that we're talking about trade, investments and sustainable growth, I'm sure the delegates would like to hear about an overarching strategy, by the DTI, by the government. Can you kindly walk us through that?
Thank you, Mike. First of all, good morning to everyone. It will take getting used to being in an Arangkada event where our good friend John Forbes is not here. But I'm sure he is watching us. On the overarching strategy, siguro as it relates to the overall theme of sustainability, actually the Philippines, the government, sees this whole shift towards greater sustainability, this greater importance that is being put globally on sustainability. In fact, it's not just importance, but an imperative towards sustainability as a game changer that benefits the Philippines. Being a country that has limited fossil fuel-based resources, we see the shift towards sustainability as very important. And in that context, we have been positioning the Philippines as the regional hub for smart and sustainable manufacturing and services. Another important component of that strategy is the next sentence, by using market-based tools to empower the private sector. So the whole positioning strategy is for us to be the regional hub in Southeast Asia for smart and sustainable manufacturing and services using market-based tools to empower the private sector. And in that context, there are, of course, it is based on our comparative advantage on 3 areas. Number 1, very well known, our rich and talented workforce. Second is our abundance in natural resources that are needed by the world as we transition to a greener future. In particular, I'm referring to nickel, copper, and cobalt. And then the third one is our strategic location. So with this, our priority sector then comes to very important would be processing of minerals. So we are heavily attracting investments in terms of mineral processing. And then second, in terms of telco, data centers and submarine cables. And then moving up, electric vehicles, and then smart agriculture, high-tech manufacturing, and outsource assembly and testing for semiconductors. So that's the overall positioning strategy for the Philippines.
Thank you, Yusek Perry. So definitely a lot of the enablers would be, as you mentioned, talent, our young workforce talent, natural resources, and lastly, our strategic location within Asia. And then, so that's from the government's perspective, right? If we can turn over to Ralph, maybe if you can also elaborate on the role, very important role of the private sector and how it relates to sustainable growth and development as well.
Thank you very much. It's a very timely topic. The World Bank just adopted sustainability as its second mission besides poverty reduction last week at the annual meetings in Marrakesh. So it's going to be a big focus of the World Bank. We published a report last year called the Country Climate and Development Report, where we are exploring the interaction between climate change in the Philippines and its development model. And it leads to a number of conclusions about what the public sector can do, what the private sector can do. And it's always good to start from the principles where the environment is a global good and climate change is a global bad. And it means the externalities and the private sector typically will not take it into account. So the role of the government is clear in the best of times. But now we are also in the times of limited fiscal space. So the Philippines has to be even more judicious about how to use the government's power to support the greening of the economy. So there are three topics we can talk about. I mean, one is setting the prices right. The second one is removing obstacles to private sector investment in climate action. And the third one is fulfilling the traditional role of the government as applied to the greening of the economy. Now, if you look at them one by one, setting the prices right, there's a whole discussion about introducing a form of carbon pricing. It's something the World Bank and many other institutions happily support. You can go only so far with mandates and incentives. They may change the firm's behavior, but not necessarily consumer behavior. And only pricing emissions and carbon at the cost to the environment and society is going to change the behavior, both in terms of moving away from dirty forms of energy towards cleaner forms of energy. A kind of side, besides this, is about getting the green incentives right, making them well-targeted to make sure that they really incentivize the right behavior of firms. If you look at the second part about removing obstacles, the government, as Secretary Balisaka already mentioned, liberalized the renewable energy sector, and we are really supportive of it. It's a very important step for the country. So now it's a question of what to do next. What are the other obstacles for the private sector to invest in renewables? And there's still a big agenda about streamlining, permitting, and making sure that these investments can materialize quickly and become profitable so that limited fiscal resources are needed, especially since the cost of renewable energy is approaching that of traditional energy. The third one about the traditional role, the government can solve three problems that will help the private sector. The first one is solving coordination problems. Two examples. Renewable energy, the biggest potential renewable energy is far away from Manila. So in order to get it to Manila at the big urban centers, you need to build a grid. And this is where the government can help invest in a grid that is smart enough to deal with renewable variable energy. The second coordination problem is EVs. You need vehicles, but also charging stations. Some of the World Bank's research shows that incentivizing spending a peso on an EV or a peso on a charging station has a different impact. Spending a peso on a charging station incentivizes 10 EVs rather than one. So what's the most effective way of using your incentives to solve coordination problems? The second one is providing public goods, access to green technologies, and having an educated labor force, and promoting green jobs which initiative by DOLE and CCC is a very important step. And finally, solving information problems. My colleague to your left is working on a sustainable finance taxonomy, to which you undoubtedly talk about. That really will solve part of the information problem, making sure investors know where to invest, where the green sectors are, and that they are kind of internationally comparable. But there are more taxonomies. There's SIPP, there's green jobs. All of these are effectively taxonomies, and it's important that they also are consistent, and the government there can make sure that they send a single, clear signal to entrepreneurs what sectors to invest in and which ones are green. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Ralph. And then that's also from a macro perspective. Maybe if we can go to Vice Cotudio. So representing the MSMEs. So let's try to connect the things that have been discussed from a macro perspective, and then diving into specific experiences by an MSME. So can you elaborate from your perspective some of the challenges that you faced and maybe some of the things that you've experienced differently now that we're under this new administration? Go ahead, please, Vice.
Yeah. So recently, actually, the theme for MSMEs was to go, digital, and we have seen that during the pandemic that most of the businesses that actually survived and was able to cross over to, to the new normal was the businesses that were able to adopt, digital technologies, and we've seen the benefits of, using these technologies, and participating in digital economy, because they can access new or expanded markets. For like smaller or micro businesses, they're able to test their products, the marketability of their products using this like e-commerce platforms or marketplaces or even Facebook. But for the more established businesses like small and medium enterprises, they're able to, number one, increase the credibility of the brand if you have an online presence, and if you're like have like an online shop or a website that customers can go to check on your products and services. You're also able to customize consumer or customer experiences because you're able to utilize technologies like AI, machine learning, and Internet of Things, and essentially using insights about customer preferences, likes and preferences, your ability to customize their experiences. But the challenges are still out there, and we've seen in dealing with the MSMEs that number one is the limited understanding of or knowledge about these new technologies and how they can use these technologies in order to improve their businesses. Limited and therefore, because of this limited knowledge, there's like they don't know how to go about the more detailed implementation steps. They don't have access to a workforce that do have the necessary skills to be able to implement technologies, and not only to implement technologies, but also how technologies can be used to in the business sense in terms of utilizing technologies or maximizing technologies to improve business operations and improving customer servicing, logistics, and so on and so forth. And lastly, while there could be businesses that are really interested, knows how to implement digital technologies, but the problem is the availability of technology providers in the market. If you look at the World Bank research, for example, that was conducted way back in 2021 or 2022, the dynamism of the tech industry in the Philippines is very low, at about, I think, 0.5 or half business IT or tech company per $1 billion GDP, as compared to the likes of Cambodia, Vietnam, and Malaysia, and even Indonesia at about around, I think, 8 to 10 per $1 billion GDP. Investments also in the tech industry is very low, at around $500,000 per year on tech startups. And so there's a big gap in terms of digitizing our MSMEs. While large enterprises do have access to all the resources, including the people, the knowledgeable people in the ICT industry, as well as these technology solutions, but the access to these solutions and to this labor force by MSMEs is very limited, and therefore adoption is still low at this level.
So thank you, Vice. And on the latter part of your answer, you mentioned a lot of the issues being faced by MSMEs. And definitely, since in terms of number, you comprise more than 99% of all registered entities in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So I guess what kind of support would the MSMEs need in order to bridge that gap? Because we always hear the saying that investments will come to those companies that are mature enough and are ready. And we also hear about a high level of liquidity in the Philippines. So sources of financing is not necessarily the issue, right? They're ready to invest. The problem is that there's not enough mature investee companies to invest in. And to the extent that we can have more MSMEs that are investment ready, from the investor's perspective, that will definitely help bridge the gap. So what are your ideas and thoughts on how to potentially bridge that said gap?
Yeah, well, I think it's the MSMEs requires a lot of help, particularly in terms of, building their capacity. Number one, to improve the quality of their products on the product development side, and make sure that their products are, acceptable to the market and are able to participate in like regional or even global value chains. Second is the ability to scale up in terms of increasing their capacity. Because if you want to participate like in a regional value chain, then you should be ready to meet the demands in terms of volume and scale, as well as compete on the at least on the cost side, right? And thirdly, the ability of our MSMEs in terms of using new technologies to be able to improve product quality and efficiency on the operation side. Using technologies like AI-driven machine learning and all those stuff can help. Now, in a global or regional value chain setting, for example, if you have a client, say Walmart in the U.S., and they're implementing like just-in-time inventory management system, and you're providing inventory, part of the inventory that they sell in the U.S. you provide, then that means you should be able to interconnect with Walmart using, modern technologies, electronic data interchanges, as well as predictive analytics that can help you forecast effectively inventory requirement of your clients.
Thank you, Vice. And then since we're talking about sustainable growth, a component of sustainable growth would always be sustainable finance. So that's where Beng can help us. So maybe can you give us an overview first of the sustainable finance framework being rolled out by the BSP, and then any particular milestones that we should be aware of to better appreciate the framework that has been rolled out?
Okay, thank you for that question. First, good morning, everyone, and good morning to my co-panelists. Let me answer that question in 3 ways. First, the actions of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, we ensure that our efforts first are aligned with our authorities and mandate to promote and maintain price stability and financial stability. And then we ensure that these efforts or actions are aligned with the climate commitments and targets of the national government, and also to the extent feasible to international standards to maintain that competitiveness of the financial sector. So as a organization, the Bangko Sentral, well, just to lead by example to our supervised entities, we launched the Sustainable Central Banking Program. So that's the overarching strategy of the BSP in promoting the sustainability agenda in the financial system. So we have released our 11 action point, or the SCB strategy, in December 2022. So it actually reflects the vital or the different roles of the BSP as an enabler, mobilizer, and doer in championing this sustainability agenda. And after the release of that strategy, we have issued our maiden sustainability report in July 2023. It's actually a narrative of the sustainability journey of the BSP and how we bring sustainability in the front of our operations, particularly in the financial supervision, and also some preliminary work in the monetary policy, and also in our reserve management and other support operations like the risk management, our IT, and also the building and facilities management. And then as a supervisor, as you have mentioned, we released the Sustainable Finance Framework way back in April 2020 at the height of the pandemic, actually, because we know that it is a good timing also as banks revisited their strategies. So why not consider now the impact of climate change and other environmental and social risks into the strategies resetting and in revisiting this direction of the banks. So the Sustainable Finance Framework outlines the broad expectations of the BSP on the duties and responsibilities of the board in integrating sustainability principles in their governance, in their risk management, and also in their operations. Following the Sustainable Finance Framework, we have also issued granular guidelines requiring banks to consider environmental and social risk factors in their credit, both in lending and investing activities, and also in their operational risk management system. So these are all geared towards strengthening the risk management of banks, because we know that the climate change can pose stability concerns on this institute front of our operations, particularly in the financial supervision, and also some preliminary work in the monetary policy, and also in our reserve management and other support operations like the risk management, our IT, and also the building and facilities management. And then as a supervisor, as you have mentioned, we released the Sustainable Finance Framework way back in April 2020 at the height of the pandemic, actually, because we know that it is a good timing also as banks revisited their strategies. So why not consider now the impact of climate change and other environmental and social risks into the strategies resetting in revisiting this direction of the banks. So the Sustainable Finance Framework outlines the broad expectations of the BSP on the duties and responsibilities of the board in integrating sustainability principles in their governance, in their risk management, and also in their operations. Following the Sustainable Finance Framework, we have also issued granular guidelines requiring banks to consider environmental and social risk factors in their credit, both in lending and investing activities, and also in their operational risk management system. So these are all geared towards strengthening the risk management of banks, because we know that the climate change can pose stability concerns on these institutions and in the entire financial system. On the other side of the coin, we also issued regulations that provide incentives to our banks, so they can provide, well, like the term that we use in this forum, Arangkada, so we can accelerate sustainable finance. So there are existing regulations of the BSP that exempt some exposures, for instance, the lending to the micro and small medium enterprises from certain prudential limits, and also, well, the broad sustainable finance is actually recognized by law and as implemented by the BSP. So this is one of the mode of compliance to the mandatory credit to agriculture, to fisheries and rural development. And also, we released actually the latest exposure draft, providing additional incentive measures to our banks in the form of additional lending capacity and reduced reserve requirement rates for the sustainable bonds that they issue. So that's all the policies issued and to be issued by the BSP. And as mentioned by, before I forgot, as mentioned by Ralph earlier, also BSP together with the Securities and Exchange Commission and also the Insurance Commission are also working on the Sustainable Finance Taxonomy Guidelines. It's actually out for comments, and we're currently evaluating the comments that we have received so far. Thank you.
One follow-up question in relation to that is, there have been a lot of policies, frameworks being rolled out. And financial institutions have to set up their own sustainability department. We have a chief sustainability officer, etc. So that's on their side, trying to keep up with the things that they need to know. But from the BSP's perspective, are there any educational campaign, regular updates to make sure that the new regulations, new framework are really understood by the financial institutions and obviously up to the borrowers, right? So what are there programs in place to ensure that?
First, when we released the Sustainable Finance Framework, we provided a 3-year transition period for banks to adjust, if necessary, any operational or strategic adjustment that they have to undertake. So the need to set up a specific sustainability unit or to have a chief sustainability officer, well, it depends on the bank. We provide the flexibility to the banks, whether to create a specific unit or to just embed this function in the existing risk management unit. And the circulars actually took effect last May 2023. So from the time of the issuance to May 2023, we actually run or roll out various capacity building programs or activities for large banks and also for the small and mid-sized banks. And then there are also some programs or capacity building in coordination with the industry associations. So we are, through Byfield, we are also providing this capacity building. And also, not only for banks, internally, we also conducted the policy implementation dialogue with our frontline supervisors to understand if indeed they understood the regulation and what are the challenges faced by the banks. So indeed, the result of all this dialogue points to the need to increase more the capacity building and activities of the BSP.
Thank you for that. And then before we move on to the questions from the floor, maybe I'll go back to Yusek Perry. So definitely investments and hence our ability to grow sustainably is directly related to how we are faring relative to our neighbors in the region. So a natural question would be, how are we faring relative to other countries, ASEAN or Asia Pacific, in terms of being a preferred investment destination? If you can cite us numbers so that we'll know how effective or potentially currently ineffective those programs are.
Thank you very much, Mike. We still have a lot to do in terms of being the preferred destination for FDIs in Southeast Asia. But we made the commitment to be the second biggest investment destination in Southeast Asia. Just for context, the number one is, of course, Singapore, which even on a bad year easily does at least $100 billion net FDI. It's followed by Indonesia, which does about $20 to $25 billion net FDI. And then Vietnam does about $15 billion. Then Philippines, Thailand, and Malaysia were competing at the 4th, 5th, and 6th places. For the first half of this year, unfortunately, because of global headwinds, most of us have experienced a decline in net FDIs. Philippines, we've experienced a 20% decline. Malaysia experienced a 67% decline. Indonesia declined by about 5%. Vietnam did slightly better, 0.5% increase. And Thailand, I don't have the figures for the first semester for Thailand, but for the first quarter of this year, it declined by 65%. But these are the actual net FDIs as reported by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. What is equally important would be the approvals of registrations of projects that go to investment promotion authorities. Because the timeline is that, okay, you have your investment leads, you convert them to register with you, and then this would then provide you with the pipeline or inflows of FDIs in the next 2, 3 or so years. In the approvals that we have been seeing in the IPAs, most especially PEZA and the Board of Investments, there has been a very significant increase. So for example, for the Board of Investments, last year, we did about 729 billion pesos worth of approvals. This year, January to September, we did 740 billion pesos approvals. For this month, I think we'll reach by tomorrow's board meeting, we'll be able to already reach 1 trillion pesos worth of approvals. Of course, our target, initially the target for BOI was just 1 trillion pesos. That was set December of last year. But when we saw the strong influx of investment applications, January and February of this year, our target was increased to 1.5 trillion pesos, or double the actual amount of last year. So we still have 2 months to reach that 1.5 trillion new target, but in terms of the old target, I think we're done with that. Realistically, we would probably reach additional 300 billion for the next 2 months. But very important would be the composition of these investments. This had been mostly in terms of renewable energy and mostly in terms of foreign investments.
Thank you, Yusek Perry. And then we'll move on to the questions raised and then posted from on Mentimeter. I'll just read through them and then let's see who would be the most appropriate one to answer. So, new clean technologies in manufacturing will require upscaling of the workforce and will lead to displacement of low-skilled workers. So what are the incentives to firms to upskill and reskill workers? Sounds like a question for you, Yusek.
For registered projects, they actually have a choice of opting for an enhanced deduction, menu of enhanced deductions, and that would include training of workers. For registered business enterprises, we are allowing up to 100% or double the actual cost in terms of deductibility from taxable income. Unfortunately, no one has been minding that enhanced deduction, menu of enhanced deductions. Most have been opting for the more simple, lower special corporate income tax of 5% because it's simpler. But if you just kindly look at your business model and if it makes sense for you to apply for rather than the straightforward lower corporate income tax and go for the enhanced deductions on power, on training, on buying local, then it might work for you. Just a quick plug on our part. We have recently, last October 20, published a new incentive of the BOI, and there's already one company that is availing of this incentive. As we all know, of course, one of the biggest challenges in the Philippines is power cost, but that is fossil fuel-based power. I just came from an IFF negotiation abroad where my counterpart was proudly mentioning to me that in their country, they're subsidizing 50% of their power costs. So how could the Philippines compete in that scenario? But that's why for us, this whole shift towards more sustainability and lessening fossil fuel subsidy is something that is good because it will lessen our disadvantage vis-a-vis that. But now, right now, what we have done is to provide for an incentive that allows up to 50% subsidy by way of an income tax holiday to your actual investment cost, less land cost for those who are shifting to renewable energy. So just an example, I was in Cebu last week. There's this Japanese company that employs 18,000 workers. They have implemented a 8 megawatt project for their solar power. So essentially, they're being required by their buyer. They're producing components for a mobile phone to shift to renewable energy. So the total investment cost, less the cost of land, etc., is about 500 million pesos. So the government is willing to support that by up to 250 million pesos. We have benchmarked that in the region, and that's very competitive. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusek Perry. I've been informed that we're down to our last 2 minutes. So for sure, we won't be able to go through all of the questions posted, but I'd like to think that our panelists would continue to be in the venue, no? Just in case you have further questions. But I guess one of our last questions would be still in relation to MSMEs. How can MSMEs secure affordable financing for expansion and innovation in a highly competitive market? Maybe if you have insights in relation to that, Vice, we'd be happy to hear out.
Yeah. Okay. So for MSMEs to get into financing, I think what I've seen. Let's talk about digitalization in relation to financing. And I've seen models, for example, where other countries focus on helping their MSMEs. Number one, gain scale by accessing new markets or expanded markets. Therefore, increasing the revenues using digital technologies, so through e-commerce. The second step is to making sure that these MSMEs do invest in technologies that would improve their capability on the back end side or the back operations, including investing in solutions like accounting systems that would enable them to generate more accurate financial statements. And therefore, if they have more accurate financial statements, that means financial institutions can give them like credit scores and allow financial institutions to extend credit to these MSMEs. Another way of MSMEs accessing credit is the use of these digital banks, is through these digital banks and fintechs. Now, even if you don't have like historical financial statements that can support the giving of credit scores, they can, fintechs and digital banks can make use of transaction history using, technology platforms in terms of providing innovative credit scores and therefore allowing them to extend, credit to these MSMEs.
Thank you, Bex. And then go ahead, Beng.
Yeah, if I can also add, actually, the banks lending to SMEs are generally driven on the assessment of the creditworthiness of these enterprises and also on the cash flows that will be generated from the underlying project. But I think to make financing more affordable, there is a need to develop the blended finance ecosystem. Just to support also just to lower the risk also, and
blended financing.
Yes, the blended finance,
okay.
where we can also explore risk-sharing facilities with some development partners to lower the risk premium for these loans to small and medium enterprises. Thank you.
Thank you. And then if we can go back to you, Ralph. So since we're talking about increasing investments in general, and presumably you'd also have a good perspective relative to the other countries on how it's treated. So how can the Philippines become an even more attractive destination for investments in general and then green investments in particular?
From global investor surveys, we see that investors care about maybe, they have a top 10 list of concerns. They care about macroeconomic stability, policy, predictability. They care about infrastructure, the quality of labor force. Taxation is often not in the top 4 list. It's number 5, number 6, which shows that there's only so much you can do with tax incentives. We hear the word a lot, but they only work together with when all the other fundamentals are right. So that's definitely an opportunity where the Philippines can look at. Macroeconomic stability is something, as you could see from the Yusek Balisacan's presentation. The Philippines has a very stable macroeconomic framework. There's a investment-grade credit rating. So then the question is going down. Is policy predictable? What about infrastructure? and the labor force. And that's where a lot of work can be done. Policy predictability is something that can be done faster, because that's something you can design based on your legal framework. And the legal framework, there are many laws already on the book waiting to be implemented in the right way. And this is where a lot of work can be done. In the longer term, infrastructure is definitely at the forefront of the agenda. We've seen it now for the last maybe 8 years, that public investment has been increasing rapidly, but also foreign direct investment, investment through PPPs has really increased. The Philippines has really invested a lot, even if that means coming from a very big lagging behind all the other East Asian countries. So rapid increase in investment, but still lagging behind your neighbors. So that agenda continues to be in the forefront. Then the quality of the labor force, this the most important topic where a lot of work has to be done. We know from international scores that PISA international scores tend to be quite low for the Philippines. So this is where a lot of attention is needed. It seems a very good generation of labor force is currently there, but and you can see it in the thriving IT BPO sector. But the question is, can you maintain that type of skills, and can you also improve it? Because automation and AI may, start to try to come after some of those jobs. So that's perhaps the agenda to look at.
Thank you for those. And then, staying with you, Ralph, one of the items you mentioned earlier would be price setting. Definitely, pricing of services and products would be the typical, take into account labor, take into account materials, and potentially overhead. But how about the aspect of incorporating the green/sustainability aspect into setting prices for services and products? So question here is, can you expound more about the impact of carbon pricing and its possible implications if implemented now in the Philippines?
Carbon pricing is something that really works well if you also have alternatives. And increasingly, the Philippines has alternatives. The renewable energy sector is booming, as Yusuf Berry mentioned. So there's a lot of scope to accelerate the transition from fossil-based fuel to renewables, because the interest is there, and it can possibly be accelerated. On vehicles, increasingly we see the importation of EVs, that people do see alternatives. So including a carbon price is important to look at, can consumers and firms make a kind of shift to different types of inputs that are less carbon intensive. So the impact, of course, could be on prices. This could be, but a lot of ways to mitigate the impact. A carbon tax is going to lead, if it's imposed as a tax, it would lead to a lot of revenue. And the government will have choices what to do with the revenue. Do you invest in the competitiveness of your economy? Do you spend it on social protection for the poorest to make sure that they are shielded from price increases? Or do you recycle it into certain industries that are trade exposed to make sure that they don't lose competitiveness? So there's a lot of ways and examples of other countries in which they have put carbon tax revenue to good use to make sure that the carbon tax not only incentivizes the right behavior, but it also builds the largest possible coalition to maintain the carbon pricing in place. Perhaps the worst you can do is to spend the money on projects that where no one benefits from, or not many people, because then people only see the cost rather than the benefit, and that will lead perhaps to resistance to carbon pricing. So it's a topic that many countries have been introducing, also in East Asia. Singapore is an example, Indonesia is an example, Thailand, all of them are already in the implementation phase of carbon pricing. The Philippines is on the way by having already a law proposed in the lower house. So you're now kind of also together with other countries to the extent that this becomes coordination, a coordinated mechanism, it will be easy to impose it. At the same time, there's also a kind of global environment. The European Union is imposing a carbon border adjustment mechanism, which may at the moment not affect the Philippines too much, but as more countries adopt it and adopt it in sectors where the Philippines is exporting carbon-intensive products, they will basically capture your tax base by imposing a carbon tax in the European Union. And at that point, you may as well try to capture it yourself. So there's a lot of developments that are important to closely track as the Philippines to make sure you made the right choice there.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And then, again, we're down to our last two questions. So going back to Yusek Perry, what is the current position or direction of the Philippines on the inclusion of critical minerals in the country's existing and or future international engagements?
Thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier, one of the advantages of the Philippines is our abundance in minerals. These are the critical minerals that are needed to transition to a greener future, in particular those that are needed in battery manufacturing, that are needed eventually in your data centers, electric vehicles, etc. So we have been working towards including critical minerals in all of our FTAs. In particular, for example, if you look at the US, they have an Inflation Reduction Act that essentially says that subsidies for electric vehicle buyers can only be given to those who are buying an electric car whose components, including for batteries, have been sourced either within the US or from an FTA partner country. A workaround that has been introduced by the Department of Treasury to consider a critical minerals agreement as a form of an FTA. That is why we have been asking the US to also have a critical minerals agreement with us because of these types of incentives. But at the end of the day, we have the minerals and they don't have it. It's as simple as that. Unfortunately, the minerals that we now have are mostly exported in unprocessed form. So the basic objective for us is to invite investments into critical minerals processing. Most importantly, we have been so focused on this, on nickel processing. And there are very good prospects. Hopefully, we can finalize this before the end of the year for nickel processing facilities. But just to, if I can further elaborate, when I mentioned earlier that our positioning strategy is, okay, to position the Philippines as the smart and sustainable hub for manufacturing and services in the region, using market-based tools that empower the private sector. That's a very important differentiation of our approach vis-a-vis the approach of other countries within the region that have been left and right, been imposing export bans and other more arbitrary measures to be able to attract investments. Thank you.
And that's all of the time that we have for this panel discussion. I would like to thank all of our panelists for gamely answering all of the questions, and thank you to all the delegates for your questions. So I think to formally thank all of our panelists, the Secretariat will be giving over plaques of appreciation. Okay.
That's right. Thank you, Mike. We are inviting Kimmy Siu Diwar. Kimmy Siu Diwar, please come up on stage to present the plaques of appreciation. Okay, we are calling Mr. Eb Hinchcliffe up on stage to give the awards of appreciation, and for a photo opportunity. Mr. Eb Hinchcliffe. Thank you again, Mike, Yusek Perry, Ralph, Deputy Director Rodora, and Vice, also Eb, for that insightful first panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, we now move forward to an overview of the Philippines' commitment to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. To present our special session guest speaker, please welcome to the stage Frank Thiel, who serves as the Managing Director at Quezon Power Philippines Company Limited and the President of the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines.
Thank you. Hi. A pleasant good morning to everyone. I hope you are all enjoying the forum so far. I'm Frank Thiel. I'm the Managing Director for Quezon Power Philippines and also San Buenaventura Power. I'm also the current President of the American Chamber of Commerce. I say current because my term will lapse at the end of this year, and I was already looking for a replacement. On behalf of the Joint Foreign Chambers, I would like to say thank you to Yusek Perry Rodolfo for his comments, Ralph Van Dorn, Deputy Director Rodora Brazil de Vera, and Vicente Catudio. That was a very informative session. I took note of a lot of the things that they were talking about. Also to Michael for doing such a great job in moderating the panel, and also to Benjamin for a fine introduction. For the next part of the program, we're putting a spotlight on the country's commitment to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And we're truly honored to be hearing the message of Senator Pilar Cayetano, the Sustainable Development Goals champion in the Senate. Senator Pia has been a consistent advocate for sustainability in the Senate. As the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Sustainable Development, Goals, Innovation, and Future Thinking, she works to align laws and policies with the country's Sustainable Development Goal commitments and future-proof crucial sectors with the aid of future thinking tools. Through her role as Senior Vice Chair of the Senate Finance Committee, she fights for the rightful share of education and health in the national budget. Her other advocacies include women's reproductive rights, for which she was recognized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She's likewise actively engaged in global interparliamentary work, having recently been elected as a bureau member of the Inter-Parliamentary Union's Standing Committee on United Nations Affairs, and with a role as chair of the Asian Pacific Regional Chapter of UNITE. That's a network of folks that deal with global health. We at the Joint Foreign Chambers have worked with Senator Pia on several occasions in our continued advocacy for business reform legislation that is to enhance the Philippine investment climate, and we look forward to hearing what she has to say on the country's commitment to the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. On a personal note, I'd like to mention that Senator Cayetano earned her economics cum laude and law degrees at the University of the Philippines, where she played volleyball for the UP Lady Maroons team that won the 1983 UAAP title. She's also played for the National Women's Volleyball team. Senator Cayetano is also a runner, a cyclist, and a triathlete. A lawyer, an economist, a triathlete, and a mother. Senator Pia embodies what it means to be a Pinay in action, Pia, and a woman leader for our times. Her message will be delivered by Attorney Jacqueline Gan. So please join me as we welcome Attorney Jacqueline Gan on the stage. Thank you.
I would first like to thank Sir Frank for that very generous introduction to our Honorable Senator Pia S. Cayetano, to our distinguished guests, our leaders of the business sector, and our friends from the government. A pleasant morning to every one of you. It is an honor to speak before you today on behalf of the Honorable Senator Pia S. Cayetano, who was chairperson of Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation, and Futures Thinking, is deeply passionate about the fulfillment of the 2030 United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda, which the Philippines adopted as a member state in 2015. At the heart of this agenda are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, that serve as our main blueprint in attaining a sustainable future, particularly by addressing global challenges like poverty, inequality, climate change, lack of access to education and healthcare, and more. As we reflect on these global goals, we cannot overlook the profound impact that COVID-19 has had on our journey towards achieving sustainability. The pandemic exposed the gaps and vulnerabilities in our system and disrupted the progress of many of our targets. It also made us realize that we live in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. As such, Senator Pia firmly believes that in order to adapt and thrive in this VUCA world, we need to have a futures-thinking mindset. Now, more than ever, we need to embed strategic foresight into our policy-making systems in order to prepare Filipino families better, not just for the possibility of another pandemic, but for all possible scenarios the future holds. Thankfully, the 12th Arangkada Forum provides a crucial platform to discuss these sustainable transformations. For her part, the Senator continues to hold fruitful discussions with experts and, based on their insights, push for sound, innovative policies for different sectors, including education, health, transportation, and the like. These include programs that will improve the delivery of healthcare services to Filipinos, provide our youth with the skills they need to thrive in future jobs, give workers better opportunities for career growth, and create more sustainable communities in the country, among others. Lastly, if there's one more thing that was emphasized during the pandemic, it's the interconnectedness of all SDGs and the need for global connection and cooperation to achieve genuine sustainability. Together, let us design a whole-of-society approach to reach our targets through more future-thinking initiative, research, and innovation. Senator Pia hopes that this forum will be a productive platform for meaningful discussions and actions towards sustainable development. On behalf of the Senator, I, Attorney Jackie Gan, thank you, and may our collective efforts today pave the way for a better tomorrow for our next generation. Thank you, everyone, and God bless us all.
Attorney Jacqueline Gan, thank you very much for speaking on behalf of the Honorable Senator Pia Cayetano. Please remain as we invite Frank back on stage to present a plaque of appreciation and for a photo opportunity. Once again, thank you, Attorney Jacqueline Gan. Now, to introduce our guest speaker, our panel presenters, and our moderator, we call on the European Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines Executive Director, Florian Gotan.
Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Good morning to all of you. My name is Florian Gotan. I'm with the European Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, or ECCP. And on behalf of the Joint Foreign Chambers, I'd like to express our gratitude to Attorney Jacqueline Gan for delivering Senator Pia Cayetano's message. We commend Senator Pia for taking a leading role in incorporating sustainable development goals in evidence-based policymaking. We look forward to further opportunities for the private sector to collaborate with government in support of the attainment of the country's 2030 targets. On that note, I'm pleased to introduce the next panel of speakers who will share their insights and experiences in embracing innovative business solutions to advance sustainability targets and support the country's transition to a more climate-responsive economy. It's my honor to introduce the guest speaker, Mr. Edgar Chua, Chairman of Business for Sustainable Development, as well as Chairman of Makati Business Club, one of our longtime advocacy partners in the Joint Foreign Chambers. Ed is an independent director of First Gen, Integrated Microelectronics Incorporated, Metrobank, Finma Corporation, Philocement, and JG Summit, Olefins Corporation, and served as an independent director of EDC until 2021. He's one of the advisory boards of Mitsubishi Motors Philippines Corporation and Coca-Cola Bottlers Philippines Incorporated, and is the CEO of Amber Kinetics Incorporated. He sits on the boards of several schools, business organizations, and foundations. He's a recipient of numerous local and international recognitions, such as MEP's Management Man of the Year, CEO of the Year in the Asia Pacific Sabre, and Global Filipino Executive of the Year by Asia CEO. Mr. Chua is a chemical engineering graduate from De La Salle University and attended the senior management course in INSEAD in Fontainebleau, France. He was conferred Doctor of Humanities honoris causa by the De La Salle Araneta University. We also have the privilege of having three prominent panel presenters, each speaking on separate but equally interesting topics. Ms. Sarah Murphy, President of Capital One Philippines and Head of Global Operations for Capital One, will talk about hybrid work and its impact on ESG. In addition to her responsibilities as President of Capital One Philippines, Sarah is also leading a global expansion strategy inclusive of launching operations in South Africa. Having created servicing strategies for Capital One's premier product offerings, she also launched the Enterprise Work at Home capability in 2010 and then led the massive deployment of 15,000 associates to work from home at the onset of the pandemic. Sarah received a BA from Vanderbilt University, Nashville, Tennessee in 1998. To speak on the role of data in sustainability, we are joined by Ms. Eileen Udan Chao, President and Country General Manager of IBM Philippines. Eileen is the first homegrown Filipina CGM of IBM. She is currently responsible for overall P&L and business growth of IBM in the Philippines. Eileen started her career as a technical systems engineer and worked her way up across various technical and senior leadership roles within the country and throughout the ASEAN and broader Asia-Pacific region. A digital transformation champion and an advocate of diversity and inclusion in various fora by committing to move the Filipino talent, especially women, into key leadership positions and get the underserved, undermotivated external young breed into the STEM track. Eileen received her Bachelor of Science in Computer Science in Ateneo de Manila University. For our third panelist, Chemical Industry Association of the Philippines Senior Advisor, Mr. Robert Patung Bakal, will be telling us more about the bio-based economy. Bobby is a third-generation chemical professional born to a family of chemists, chemical engineers, and manufacturing entrepreneurs. He is the former Philippine country manager of Dow Chemical, a global material science company where he held various regional positions for Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. He advises industry groups, the academe, the research community, and government on industry development, sustainable chemistry, plastic circularity, and a bio-based economy. He authors an advocacy website called Philippine Manufacturing Revisited, to raise awareness on the strategic importance of manufacturing in the Philippines. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Chemical Engineering from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and Executive Master of Business Administration from the Asian Institute of Management. We'll first be hearing from them individually, then a short panel discussion moderated by Attorney Mimi Lopez Malvar, Government Relations and Country Legal Head of Procter & Gamble Philippines Incorporated, and P&G and Director of the Philippine Association of Multinational Companies Regional Headquarters Incorporated.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Florian. To our distinguished guests, fellow business leaders, a very good morning. Thank you for joining us today and making time in spite of your very busy schedules. I also wish to extend my thanks to Arangkada for organizing this event, and a warm congratulations to the Joint Foreign Chambers of the Philippines for their 12th year anniversary. One of the things that I'm really very pleased coming here today is to see how punctual and how on the dot Arangkada is as far as program timing is concerned. Fantastic, very professional. I've always been a very big supporter of Arangkada. Arangkada has been providing government and business with a forum to be able to provide what are the issues that needs to be addressed by the country. The Joint Foreign Chambers has chosen one of the most pressing topics in business today: business role in sustainability. Business has a vital role in creating and reallocating investments for sustainable development. The word is the global economy needs $7 trillion annually to finance the SDGs, and businesses are critical as an engine for green investment, job creation, and technological innovation. Businesses also have a direct impact on climate change. The industry and transportation sectors contribute 36% to the total greenhouse gas emissions every year. Reflecting global concern about sustainability and climate change, we at the Makati Business Club interviewed about 30 companies for a report we're preparing for the SEC with the assistance of SGV. From these reports, we have heard from our members over the past year that sustainability is becoming mainstream. A focus on sustainability has changed operations, products, and targets for companies across different sectors. Just to give an example, the leading companies like Nestle, Globe, RCBC are going beyond the government-mandated sustainability reporting by integrating sustainability targets in their annual key performance indicators and using sustainability metrics to guide investment decisions. These companies come from a wide range of industries: banking, FMCG, food manufacturing, telecommunications, and they include local companies as well as multinationals. The adoption of sustainability practices across the board may mean that business leaders are starting to see its benefits. Business leaders think that assessing their company's sustainability gives them a more nuanced assessment of risk, which contributes to financial returns. A number of leading banks use ESG and sustainability metrics to reassess their financing for coal power. As a result, these banks will no longer invest in new coal power and are slowly reducing their exposure to coal-powered power generation to 0% by 2032. I think one of the challenges that we are facing is actually this transition. The biggest challenge will be how to transition and make it a just transition. Others in the banking sector are also starting to offer products and services on green financing and renewable energy. In a smaller scale, CFOs say that the shift from fluorescent to LED light bulbs are paying for themselves in the electricity bill savings. Similarly, a CFO from a large local retailer said that the shift to digital systems allowed her to quickly aggregate and analyze information across different branches in a way that was impossible with paper records. Apart from its benefits to our balance sheet, an eye towards sustainability is starting to be inevitable for Philippine businesses that want to be more integrated with global markets and investors. A local airline said that they use their sustainability reporting to attract global investors. And this investment helped them weather COVID-19 when global and domestic travel ground to a halt. A local telco company follows global sustainability and integrity standards so that they continue to be listed in the New York Stock Exchange and have to comply with ESG disclosure standards followed by the exchange. As the private sector adopts to global trends, Philippine regulators and legislators are moving in the same direction. In 2016, the Green Jobs Act incentivized the creation of more decent jobs that contribute to preserve or restore the environment. Last year, the Extended Producers Responsibility Act mandated businesses to collect back single-use plastics that they produce. And more recently, the SEC is updating the guidelines on corporate sustainability reporting for publicly listed companies. Our recent engagements indicate that the SEC aims to expand the coverage of sustainability reporting to include more businesses and possibly SMEs in the future. We see that moving business operations in a sustainable direction can be challenging, especially during this transition period and especially for smaller companies that don't have the same resources and fiscal space. MBC has partnered with Shell, Globe, and SGV and others to support companies in their initial steps towards sustainability. In one of our most recent initiatives with SGV, we engaged with 38 member companies to understand corporate sustainability reporting and provide recommendations to the SEC. The Climate Bond Initiative said that 90% of carbon emissions come from Scope 3, a business assets, value chains, or suppliers. This is why MBC is also assisting large companies like Globe to train their suppliers, who are mostly SMEs and MSMEs, in sustainability practices and sustainability reporting. Through this program, as MSMEs understand the business case for sustainability and how they can move forward with an action plan. On the other hand, the larger corporations that mainly form MBC's membership are able to better understand the risks in their supply chain and assist their suppliers in implementing sustainability practices. In closing, our conversations with large and small businesses show that leadership is the most important factor in setting and implementing sustainability practices. You will hear more from this from the panelists later on. The distinguished panelists will cover different aspects of this. And we thank the JFC for bringing together business leaders to collectively tackle the issue before us. I hope that this forum helps us forge partnerships to improving business value through sustainability. Thank you very much, and I hope and look forward to very productive outcome of the sessions today. Thank you. Thank you.
Makati Business Club Chairman Ed Chua. Thank you, Ed. Following Ed's insightful presentation, we now request our panel presenters to go up on stage. Each panelist brings a distinct perspective to the table and will present their respective areas of expertise. First, please welcome Sarah Murphy. Sarah is the President and Head of Global Operations at Capital One Philippines. She will discuss hybrid work and its impact on environmental, social, and corporate governance, or ESG.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Murphy. I am the President of Capital One Philippines. I've been at Capital One for 25 years. And of those 25 years, I've been in the Philippines for 3 months. So I'm new to the Philippines. I moved my family here this summer, and we are getting adjusted and having the best time. I'm excited to be here today to talk about sustainability as we think about the future of hybrid work around the world. I've spent over half of my time with Capital One obsessing about the future of work. We deployed our work-at-home strategy back in 2009, well before the pandemic. And then obviously at the time of the pandemic, we're called upon to scale that across the world. And now on the other side of the pandemic, we are contemplating our go-forward strategy with a lean towards work at home, hybrid, and remote work. In terms of an introduction to Capital One Philippines, next slide, please. We are a financial services BPO. We have over 4,000 associates here in Metro Manila and beyond. We are 10 years young. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary earlier this month. And what makes us different is that we are a hybrid organization with 90% of our associates working from home full-time. We have a hub in Alabang, Philinvest, and we are thinking entirely differently about our reliance on physical real estate in response to our virtual first approach. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then lastly, at the center of everything is our corporate mission to change banking for good. That's at the center of how we serve our customers, our associates, and the communities in which we live. Next slide, please. While there are pros and cons to hybrid work, we believe overall it can have a really awesome and beneficial impact around the world in terms of sustainability. Next slide. First, our carbon footprint. So fun fact, taking 300,000 vehicles off the road a year lends itself to the equivalent of 55 million trees in terms of environmental goodness and impact. Next slide, please. We know that eliminating commutes has a meaningful impact on quality of life and overall well-being. Here in Metro Manila, we know that commutes can total anywhere from 3 to 4 hours a day. It's amazing to be able to reinvest that time in productive, life-centered activities, whether that be wellness, exercise, fitness, spending time with friends and family, meal prep, all the things that you get back when you take a commute out of the equation. Next slide, please. We acknowledge that our reliance on the physical footprint and our real estate will look different. I'm not here to tell you it will be eliminated entirely. I think what we will see, though, is that we will have a smaller presence and more presence in terms of the number of hubs we have, but they won't be the same overhead that we've historically thought about with having to fill a building full of 1,000 traditional production call center seats. And by not having that kind of overhead and type of burden, that allows us to have smaller, more hub-like real estate footprints. And so instead of coming to work and plugging in and spending 8 hours talking to customers, you may come to the building for different reasons. So we're refitting our physical footprint to be more conducive to gathering, to wellness, to celebration, recognition. We have our health centers, our fitness centers, meal and food access, all part of our leading real estate strategy. We currently have one hub, and that is legacy from our historical operating model, and that's in Alabang. But imagine a future where we have multiple hubs across the country with community and gathering centers as part of our offering. Next slide, please. We know that hybrid can make us more resilient. Our retention rates are at a record high. It also allows us to get access to talent that may otherwise not be available to us, as well as reduces our business continuity risk. We've seen this play out around the world where historically we were kind of vulnerable to the city or the block we were on and the grid that it sits on. In the future, with folks distributed, if something were to happen and there is a disruption, it's unlikely we lose our entire workforce. We have the benefit of geo-diversification, ISP diversification, electrical grid diversification, in which case we are just naturally more resilient. Next slide, please. And in terms of access to talent, it completely expands. We're able to recruit and retain a more diverse workforce and access to talent that may otherwise not be able to come and work in a traditional call center environment. So we think about single parents, people with disabilities, and even folks that are looking for part-time. When you introduce a 3 to 4 hour commute, that becomes a non-starter for so many. And now we can reduce that obstacle and bring employment and opportunities to more folks around the region. Next slide, please. In terms of how this is playing out for Capital One Philippines and actual specific and tangible outcomes, we're seeing the best team engagement, the lowest attrition, and the highest enablement scores in our entire tenure as an organization. Folks question, well, if you can't see them, how do you know that they're actually productive? Our productivity is also record high in the last 6 years. So folks are happy, they're engaged, they're supporting our customers, and we're getting really awesome business outcomes. That said, we love to take victory laps and we're incredibly proud of those results, but we know our work is not done and we must continue to learn and seek input from not only our own teams, but from around the industry and the markets in which we serve. And so as we think about what it means to create a culture in a virtual first environment, that does look different. I will point to a very recent example. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, and we rented out the Phil Invest tent, and we had over 1,000 associates come celebrate with us in person, and we also had hundreds of folks join us from Zoom. And what's amazing about that is that's based on choice. So based on personal preference, some folks wanted to come be part of it in person, and some folks chose, I want to enjoy this from the confines of my home, and that is what's most comfortable to me, and both are winning outcomes. I think as we look ahead, we think about our industry priority to add 1.1 million jobs by 2008 and how this strategy sits with that. And the benefit is we are no longer creating a pocket of disruption here in Metro Manila, and we can actually go beyond Metro Manila and bring opportunities to Tier 2 cities and tap into education and other impact sourcing initiatives as a result of going beyond the walls of just a metro area. And so we're really encouraged about that and the opportunities that it presents us. And again, we are still learning every day, our strategy is evolving, but we're really encouraged about the future of work, and it's tied to the overall sustainability agenda for Capital One and more broadly across the geographies in which we operate. I look forward to continuing the discussion with our panelists in a few moments. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and welcome to the Philippines. Next, we have Eileen Hudan Hiao. Eileen is the President and Country General Manager of IBM Philippines. She will explain the role of data in sustainability.
I'll sing for a minute because I was told I will wait. I think it's almost afternoon, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm very, very pleased and humbled to be here among these very distinguished guests, colleagues in the private sector and, of course, in government to talk about our agenda for accelerating sustainability for the Philippines. I lead IBM in the Philippines, and while we're waiting on IBM, for all of you, we are in the technology sector, and we have been in the Philippines across 15 presidents. Yes, that is 87 years, so it's quite some time. So without leaving the Philippines, by the way, so I think that's a good achievement for us. We have quite a diverse population. Our population in IBM Philippines is almost mimicking the country demographics. If you've seen the demographic dividend, that is the same age of our roughly 70% of our population, which is really the millennials and the Gen Z. So, you know, what we can try in IBM Philippines, we can always share with the rest of the community as well in technology. IBM, so, okay, so IBM's had a real long history of sustainability, and you can see some of the data points here. But back in even 2003, we were the first company globally to actually do all the recovery and recycling for IT, including the waste, the e-waste. So you can imagine all of this within the technology sector. We've made our commitment back in 2021 to go net zero by 2030, including skills that will be supporting that from a D&I agenda for social goals. Within the ESG, we've made our commitment even close to a century back from a global perspective. Back in 2022, so as a technology company, of course, we have used our prowess in IP and the tools to actually start to measure, and I will give you some examples of that as we come through. What I'm going to share with you this afternoon, for just very briefly, is not only the role of data per se, but role of data and technology in the agenda on sustainability. While I cannot give you all the examples, I will just tell you why you should listen at least to us. So these are some of the fast facts Sarah shared also earlier from an IBM perspective. It has also been a very big journey for us to get into sustainability agenda. So not only in waste, but I will just highlight some key parts here. Many of you who here are very good experts already on the green side, right? But one of the key things that is not really I think focused, and as I encountered this within the Philippine private sector as well, you look at the 99%. So for all the procurements globally, it takes a very deliberate attempt to take a look at who you partner with so you can actually measure and determine, are they also supporting your sustainability agenda and also in their supply chain. It's a tricky one to say, yes, I support. It's another one to say, how do you prove it, right? So for us to be able to garner the recognition, all of these data points you must be able to prove. So yes, it's got to be evidence-based, and you have to prove it. In 2023, similar to 2022, IBM is the technology partner for the COP28 in Egypt. And if I'm not mistaken, we will continue to be committed for next year, right? Now, why are we all of a sudden starting to come out more in here? And that's precisely, I guess, the reason why I also got invited here. Because data is playing a very, very big role in technology as we get into this. If there is one thing that I will ask you to remember, very simple statement, if we cannot see the data and it's not visible, how do we make it operational and actionable? So we'd love to baseline, we'd love to benchmark. As you all know, when you're started to work on your KPIs, if you cannot measure, you cannot take action. So it's a very simple principle, it sounds like, but I'll show you. Yes, this is a BC chart. What do I call this chart? This is a what did you know that chart. Let's stay on the green part at the top. What do you know is data today? You know text, you know graphics, right? What else is the type of data that you know? Maybe you can name 3, 4 numbers. No, that's still base data. But did you know that for every industry, there are very different types of data? Smart meters produce data. Cars produce different data. Your pipeline produces data. Welcome to the world of Internet of Things. Our watches, smart watches, our phones, their formats are very different. So practically on energy alone, there are 300 plus types of energy data. Frank, my president for the American Chamber, and I'm vice, is the expert on energy. Yes, did you know that there are 300 plus energy data types? So if you're not clear how to capture that, how do you also measure? How do you get accountability and you can show the metrics, right? In shipping, it's the same. You can see the examples in practically every industry, right? So in this room today, if we were to measure all the data points, they will not be 3. They will be different data points. The building has the building management system right here. The lights, you control that. That is all data. The radiation, all that we don't see, that is data. And by the way, they get churned, not 1 per second. They are every nanosecond. So where is IBM playing this? So there was a discussion earlier about AI. So IBM's role in the world is to be a catalyst for change with our technology based on hybrid cloud and AI. Why are we interested in that? It's not because we're going to replace human beings, but it's because we will augment and process all this data with the human intelligence, because you cannot go after that ton and volume of data and process it for certain analytics, right? Having said the types of data that we need to capture, we need to be aware of, and the variety of data, they are also, by the way, sitting on different, I turn your eye into the light blue box, which is the systems. What are systems? In the organization, you do ERP, okay? Enterprise Resource Planning, your SAP or Oracle, whatnot, right? IHS systems, the health and safety, it's a lot, but it's also gonna look into that. HR systems, right? You all see that. Asset management. Today, this is the good part. In the Philippines, there's a lot of the power companies, including some of our major sponsors here, who already use IoT for asset management, and that's good. Because, you know, as we monitor the pipelines, the gas turbines, the systems, they're actually turning back into the dashboards. So way before any human being can give it back, and it gives real-time analytics. External frameworks, you will see that. You will probably barely, if you get somebody, even a data scientist, if they're not very familiar with all the frameworks out there, they leave you because they'll be torn with which framework to comply with, right? And then you have the telco devices. Yeah, then you get the telco devices and the environmental. On top of that, then they sit on infrastructure. So in IT infrastructure, it is hybrid. It doesn't matter anymore whether you're on-premise or you're on the public cloud. Any data you churn in the green part, you can process already today using, yes, base analytics or AI or generative AI. No, this is not the time to teach you generative AI, but all I can tell you is that the technology exists today. So that's the important part. And again, these are the key gaps in disclosures. You have the frameworks, but the study is actually showing that all these areas are key gaps. And the gaps are based on the ability to capture data correctly and govern them. Don't lose hope because there are technologies out here. I'm just giving you an example. This is not the only one. We can use it for weather, we can use it for climate, but there are technologies that allow you to look at reporting, down to looking at scope 1, GHG emissions, scope 2. You can look at scope 3, including accounting with the supply chain. It will show you the metrics, benchmark you. You can look at setting up your targets, meaning to say if you don't have that, you can input parameters and it can augment what you have, right? And then also again on the frameworks, they exist. Even if you don't read that, it will tell you what do you want to comply with. Which framework? You want the UN SDG, you want the TFC, etc., right? It's there, it can guide you based on questions in case you have much less skill in the organization. So a lot of these technologies already exist out there, including the tracking, and yes, including our utility bills and our analytics, right? So what I'm telling you is that technology is there. It's probably daunting to see the data, but technology is there to be able to help you. You can see that the sustainability data, you actually have all the different types of data, but once again, if we cannot find a way to capture the data correctly and make it visible, we cannot make it operational for us to take action on that particular data. I will also say for all of you private sector out there, for all of us in the private sector, there has been already studies, and I can share this with the team, that for those who actually are able to do this, you can outperform with a profitable environment. And you can see the study here. So as we say in IBM, right, the sustainability for us is looking at it now for the future, but we want to see how we can undo what we don't want in the past. On that note, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have, and please raise your hand, see me later if you want to learn more about technology. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you. Last but certainly not the least, we are joined by the Senior Advisor at the Chemical Industry Association of the Philippines, Mr. Bobby Batumbakal. Bobby will elaborate on prospects for bio-based transition.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Bobby Batumbakal, This is probably the first time I'm going to talk after I retired from Dow Chemical, where I spent almost 3 decades in the chemical and plastic industry. So I'll tell you, it's very liberating to be able to talk about more things than your company. So I like to talk about the bio-based economy. It's a relatively new term in the Philippines, but in Europe, it's pretty well known in North America and in Northern Asian countries. So this work, which is pretty recent, comes from a group of scientists, industry, and government people from government agencies. We've convened and started talking about the bio-based economy. Next slide, please. All right. So the bio-based economy is talks about products that are bio-based, that comes from plants, and agriculture, forestry, fishing is probably the earliest or the most basic industry that any country has. And it's roughly about 1.7 trillion pesos in gross value added. Now, and one of the main products of agriculture is, of course, food production. No? And the Philippines generates about 1.9 trillion in gross value added. It's interesting that for many decades, Philippine manufacturing still predominantly produces food products. Nothing wrong with that. That's very important. However, it also shows that there is a need to create higher value manufacturing products. In fact, food manufacturing is about 47% of the manufacturing sector. So we know about food product. We also know that a lot of the agri and forestry products are used for traditional things like tobacco, paper, textile, clothing, leather, rubber. Okay? It's been there for decades. But what I'd like to talk today about are what are the more advanced biomaterial that we can derive from our rich resources in the Philippines. Namely, we already know biomass. We roughly have about 900 megawatts of power installed today. Biofuel. Did you know that the Philippines is one of the pioneers in Southeast Asia? For over a decade, we've been producing biofuels, namely bioethanol and biodiesel. You probably read in the newspaper the past few days about SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. I read that Cebu Pacific signed up, has an agreement with Neste, one of the leading Finnish, I believe, sustainability aviation fuel producer in the world. But this presentation is going to be focusing closer to what we're familiar with, or at least our group is familiar with, which is the biomaterials. These are biochemicals and bioplastics. Next slide, please. So, this is about looking for renewable material. And that's why I'm talking about bio-based. This is also talking about providing materials that we don't have. We all know that the Philippines have very little fossil fuel. In fact, if you think about, our refineries, our petrochemical sector, they all import fossil fuel feedstock to be able to produce locally. So, but on this particular slide, I will be focusing on one problematic material, which is plastic. The plastic issue is probably the most commonly discussed topic in sustainability forums such as this one, because it's ironic. While we don't have the raw materials to make plastics, while we have very limited production capacity to produce plastic, the Philippines ended up to be one of the biggest in terms of mismanaged plastic waste. So if you look at the numbers, we consume less than 3 million metric tons. It looks big, but it's not a lot compared to other countries. But it's an equivalent of 5.5 million metric tons of carbon. And the mismanaged amount is close to 1 million metric tons. And we say mismanaged. Mismanaged means it's not being recycled, it's not being landfilled, this is going to the sea or going to nature. And I did mention that, by the way, we don't even have the fossil fuel to produce this. So what can we do? Well, it has been repeatedly said that one of the raw materials or resources that we have are bio-based. And our colleagues, Dr. Ventura and Dr. Benjamin, we've determined so far that we have roughly about 40 million metric tons of agricultural resources, but not food-related resources. They're not edible resources. These are agricultural waste, waste that adds to pollution. So, but also very importantly is that the Philippines have rich biotech talent. Are you aware that the Biotech Center in UP Los Baños was established in the 1970s? It's one of the first biotech centers in Southeast Asia. And finally, I did mention we do have a bioenergy experience for a number of decades now. So what is the proposed solution? Did you know that 40 million metric tons can generate enough bioplastics beyond the total consumption of the Philippines today? It can generate up to 4 million metric tons based on domestic raw material, which is renewable, low in carbon, but more importantly, it's biocompatible. What does biocompatible mean? Meaning it's compostable, it's biodegradable, and it's circular. But beyond that, beyond making plastics, it's an opportunity to create an integrated biorefinery, which means you're not only making plastics and chemicals, you're also making different materials. Next slide, please. So, let me tell you how a bioplastic can be made in the Philippines. Next slide, please. We start from the raw materials, and and it's very interesting what are the materials that we can use there. So you got agriculture, marine, and other waste. You can use bagasse, which is the waste from sugarcane, corn stover, that's the leaves, the stalks, waste coconut water, banana pseudostem, pineapple, all sorts of things. You can also use seaweed, algae, macroalgae, microalgae. So all of this doesn't really add pressure to our food security. And finally, even more interesting, waste edible oil can be used, landfill gases, methane coming from the landfills, and even wastewater sludge. Now, if you got that raw material, then you go to biopolymer production. We're very fortunate that the Department of Science and Technology has actually been investing and funding research on bioplastics. Not only that, they approved funding for a laboratory that tests biodegradability, ecotoxicity, and compostability. And this will enable us to scale up with the help of the private sector and produce plastics to replace fossil-based. I just place there the most visible ones, whether it's straws, cutleries, bags, 3D printing, but the opportunity is a lot. But what's interesting here is that while segregation is a big issue, but when you talk about bioplastic, biodegradable plastics, you can actually compose this together with your food waste, completing the circularity that feeds as fertilizer into the agricultural sector. Last slide. Okay, so what are the actions ahead of us? The first one is that we call for a bio-based economy strategy, because coordination is very important. Coordination between government, different agencies of government, and the private sector and the research community. Second, more local research and pilot projects. Third, foreign technology. The US is the biggest producer of bioplastics, followed by the EU, and then you got Japan, China. So the technology is there, but guess what? some of these regions or country even import some of the waste products or even some of the biomass. We have the biomass here in the Philippines, and it's very diverse. Fourth, then domestic and foreign investment to scale up these technologies. And finally, participate in the global value chain. If we can produce more more bioplastics than we need, then we can participate and supply the other countries that will be needing more bioplastic as we transition to a more sustainable and circular world. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Bobby. We request that you remain as we ask Eileen and Sarah to rejoin you while we invite on stage our Panel 2 moderator, Attorney Mimi Lopez Malvar. Mimi is the country head for Government Relations and Legal at Procter & Gamble Philippines. Mimi is also the director at the Philippine Association of Multinational Companies Regional Headquarters Incorporated, or PAMURI.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's my pleasure to be moderating this panel, and we heard such very interesting insights from our speakers and our panelists today. So thank you, Ed, Sarah, Bobby, and Eileen. In the next 10 minutes, maybe if you can indulge us with just a few questions to propound on some of the things that you mentioned. Sarah, I really liked how you extolled kind of all of the virtues of hybrid and remote work, and really it is kind of the future, you know, how to prepare companies to be future ready. And there's so many things I think that companies can learn from, and the benefits that we can all get if, you know, many other companies go to this hybrid work. Bobby, you talked about Philippine bio-based economy, and you've given us some recommendations on how to really catalyze this industry. But I'd be curious also to find out if you see any barriers to, you know, this becoming more and more evident and something that we can capitalize on in the future. And Eileen, you've given us a great perspective on how we can really leverage and maximize data to enable not just metrics, you know, how we operationalize things. And I love what you said about data making everything, sustainability being visible, actionable, and operational. So maybe I'll start with Sarah. What do you think are some of the pressing or barriers, maybe obstacles, that companies typically face in adopting hybrid remote work? Why are there, you know, there are a lot, especially during the pandemic, and I think, you know, the pandemic, if there is one advantage of the pandemic, it's really to push, you know, remote and hybrid work as an option for many companies. But what do you think are the barriers for more companies adopting this approach, and how do you think we can address this?
That's a great question. Can everyone hear me? Yes, sounds like you can. I think one of the biggest barriers, I'm going to take a page out of Eileen's book, is relying on bias versus data. And so we've been very intentional to collect data along the way in our journey to better understand not just associates' sentiment and preference, but also how that translates to performance, and then benchmark ourselves within the markets in which we operate. And so it's also not a one-size-fits-all approach. I think the answer here in the Philippines is different than the answer in the US and the answer in Latin America and our emerging, developing South Africa geography. And so it's just being open to that and not relying on personal bias about how you build connection or what translates to great performance and prescribing that for your workforce, as I think the answer is different and it's evolving over time. So it's really important that folks remain open-minded to what the right answer is and be okay with getting it wrong and adjusting and trying again. And that's very much in our DNA at Capital One, and that's something we've held ourselves to throughout the journey around remote work, beginning back in 2009 and then continuing on the other side of the pandemic.
Thanks for that. My next question is for Eileen, actually. I think you've opened us, you know, our eyes up to so much potential and how we can really leverage data to enable sustainability in our operations. But I don't know if you would think it's also a fair assessment that not many companies are leveraging on data to enable their sustainability goals as well. what do you see as a barrier, and how do you think this can be overcome and more companies?
Yes, Attorney Mimi, let me ground it for the Philippines. While I've shared to you the perspective on the role of data, the reality in the Philippines, you're actually correct. And I would say the number one thing that I see is about skills. I think you've heard it from the earlier panels, skills, and it's about exposure. While we have a very good demographic dividend, if the same population, which can be tech savvy, is not exposed, we, as for example, as IBM, as a company who has the technology and so on, and we don't share, or other companies who have, we do not expose them to the possibilities, and we do not educate, right? They will never know. It doesn't matter whether they're in Maguindanao or in Holo. It doesn't matter, because the pandemic has showed us technology is also no longer an issue, right? But more importantly is the skill, right? If they're not skilled, that's a problem. So this is why what we're doing now is we're helping as IBM address, of course we're helping clients, enterprises, but that's the paying one, right? We need to build the next generation of talent, regardless where they are. So we need to, we're starting at least from the junior, senior high school, sharing it with the government on the skills platform that we have, so that they know how do you process this data with artificial intelligence, for example, and Gen AI for free. So yes, you can use it on your phone. You don't need a laptop. You don't need a tablet. So wherever you are, you can. And then you can share. And then, of course, protect the data, cybersecurity, and all of this. Because we think that even if you use AI, you have to use AI for the good, so it's got to be ethical use and governance of the data. That's what we're really after, making it trustworthy and making all of us really skill up better. And we've heard earlier, I think the government will give incentives for this. Yeah. So that's the single biggest problem, I think.
Thanks for that. Bobby, I'll turn to you, and it's an interesting discussion on bio-based plastic. As we all know, plastic has been under fire, right? For many years now, with legislation potentially banning single-use plastic, as well as plastic tax, which is, I think, one of the priorities of the Marcos administration. Can you give us your thoughts on the recently passed Extended Producer Responsibility Bill, and whether or not you see that this will enable companies, more of the obliged enterprises to shift towards bio-based plastic?
Thanks, Mimi. We're fortunate to have Secretary Tony here. EPR is an important topic for her. First of all, it's very encouraging. I learned yesterday that so far, 800 companies already signed up. But we're talking about tens of thousands of companies who could potentially be part of the EPR. I think it's a good first step, because the objective of the regulation right now is to divert. Divert means keep the plastic waste from reaching nature. However, where the limitation is that it doesn't exactly tell you which is the best way to divert. Should it be recycling? Should it be advanced recycling? Should it be biodegradability? It doesn't tell you yet. I think we will come in future regulations, but we probably need more guidance at this point, even when we're started, because we already have to put our resources. Today, maybe rightfully so, let's make sure it doesn't reach nature, but the next step has to be there right away. We gotta be able to identify what exactly should be doing. And our proposition here is that the bio-based plastic and chemicals has an important role in addressing plastic waste, as well as decarbonization.
Thanks for that. It's good that you segued into Secretary Tony. So for my final question, maybe as a last word, we do have government officials that are invited here. If you would have a wish list, let's say, of something that the government can do or something that the government can provide or support in order to enable hybrid and remote work and make it work for more companies where we can reap the benefits, data being leveraged by more companies, not just companies, but also individuals to really realize sustainability goals and also the Philippine bio-based economy. What would that wish list be for the government to really support and maximize? Maybe we'll start with Sarah.
So I'll go first. I think my wish would be that we remain open to the possibilities of future of work and a reduced reliance on traditional commercial real estate as that translates to tax incentives and other benefits that are offered. I think there's offsets and there's clearly cost associated with the reduced reliance on commercial real estate, but I think we need to think bigger picture and look at some of those offsets and be able to quantify the value of those benefits and compare them side by side and remain open to the possibilities.
Great. Yes, Eileen?
Yes, for me, I think from the government side, it would be helpful if we really model the way for every government entity to be data-driven, whether in decision-making, talking to investors, doing our own operations within the government, and also using technology and showing that it can be done. But more importantly, because we have large MSME community within the business, it has to also be inclusive. So, and trust that we in the private sector, including IBM, will do our part how to make all of this using of data and using of technology inclusive so you can subscribe and it becomes bite-sized and consumable. But we all need to model the way, right? So that we can all accelerate Arangkada and not just progress. Okay? So more, not baby steps, but bigger steps forward.
Thank you, Eileen. And Bobby?
I got two. Pwede?
Yes.
The first one has to do with government investments. You probably noted in recent years, we're seeing a shift from complete liberalization, government not being part of development, into having more active role, no? It's very important when you're developing a new industry like the bio-based economy because DOST can provide the basic research. Private sector can make big plans, but somewhere in between, there's a gap. It's very risky for private sector to go from lab to scale up. And so far, government only goes all the way to the lab and then bahala na kayo, no? So there's that gap which we hope will be bridged through industry policy, through new government initiatives. The second one has to do with regulations. Recall that biofuel, bioethanol, and biodiesel has been around, and it still is. But that's because it's mandated by law. Now, if it wasn't mandated by law, economics will happen. So, when oil prices go down, everybody's going to forget about bioethanol. But no, because it is in the law and for the common good. So, the same also with, I'm not typically asking for more regulations, but what I'm asking is for smart regulations. Because to be able to address externalities that are beyond the role of private sector, that's where government comes in. So that's where there's an opportunity to say, okay, the plastic issue is important, so this is exactly what we should be doing instead of leaving it to private sector alone. Thank you.
And with that, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Eileen. To formally thank our panelists as well, the Joint Foreign Chambers presents a plaque of appreciation for participating in the 12th Arangkada Philippines Forum today. May I ask Florian, please, to join me on stage for a photo op with the panelists.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Eileen, Bobby, and Mimi for that insightful discussion.